This time I'm going to show you how to make this cute quilted appliqued drawstring bag, perfect for giftware, but perfect for storage as well. So I've used one of the images from my fabric to make a piece of applique at the bottom down here, which I think gives it a nice finishing touch. And I've quilted on the one side, and on this side I've just top stitched along each side of the seam, just to see which worked best. And to be honest, I like the quilted side better, but of course you don't need to do that if you don't want to. So it's quite a roomy little bag, all fully lined. And it's not just a gift bag. I think this would make a perfect storage bag, maybe to store your sewing notions and bits and bobs. You could easily hang this at the back of a door or over the back of a chair if you're short on storage space. And although I've made mine in a festive Christmas robin fabric, of course you can make this in any fabric you like and in any size as well. Now I'll give you the sizes of this one in the description box underneath the video and all of the pieces that you need to cut. But if you wanted to make any of those bigger or smaller, then of course you can do. And I've also added some H640 interfacing to this one. I do think it needs some kind of interfacing or stabilizer. H640, H630 are the ones that I like to use. But if you've just got a woven interfacing, then that would work well as well. But when you've got something that's quite sturdy like the H640s, it kind of stands up alone as well. So again, details are everything that you need to cut underneath the video, so go get cutting and then let's get sewing. So these are my two main pieces of fabric. Then I've got two pieces that go on the bottom, two smaller pieces that are going to make the channel for the ribbon to go through on the top, two pieces of lining fabric, my ribbon, and one fussy cut little robin that I'm going to use as applique, and I'm just going to place him on the bottom. I have already fused some heat and bond or bond web to the back of this, and that is a fusible adhesive sheet. So you iron it onto one side, it's got a paper backing, scrape away the paper backing and then iron it onto the fabric wherever you want that to go. Put that on the back before you cut it out. You're going to find it quite difficult to iron onto the back of a smaller piece, and you could risk the possibility of the glue getting onto your iron as well, which is what we don't want to happen. And I'm also going to use some H640, which is a fusible fleece, just to make the bag a little bit more substantial. So the first thing I'm going to do is the two outer pieces. So let's put this to one side, and I'm going to sew right sides together, just across the bottom like so. So pop a few pins in there if that makes you feel a little bit more confident. And I'm using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. That's not set in stone. It could be a little bit wider, a little bit narrower. Of course that's 5mm if you're metric. And oops, just missed the end of that one. And the same with the second piece. So make sure if you're using a directional fabric that your fabric is in the right direction. Again, just line up the edges of the fabric and sew. I'm now going to put the fleece on the wrong side, so I'll trim this down to the right size in just a sec. That was a little bit too long, that's fine. So if you haven't used this before, the knobbly side is the glue side, so that goes up onto the wrong side of your fabric, so that goes down. So a nice hot iron, as hot as your fabric will take, and start in the centre and just gently smooth it out. And this is a Vaseline product. It will take heat. It's quite happy. Sorry, it will take steam. It's quite happy with steam. It doesn't tend to go wrinkly from what I've found anyway. Okay, so we are going to stitch this as well. And there we go. So I'll just cut that out roughly. Scissors, there we go. And then we'll do the same with the remaining side. Now you can, if you wish, quilt this, or you could just leave it plain. I'm going to do one side of each just to show you the difference. So on the side that I'm going to quilt, which I think I'll choose this one, so that's going to be the front of my bag, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to find my 45-degree line here and just place that over the seam there. Doesn't matter where along there you do it, it could be right on the edge of the fabric here, doesn't really matter, let's do it there. And I'm using a heat erasable pen, and I'm just going to mark lines 2 inches across to create a diamond shaped kind of crosshatch across the fabric. So as I'm using the ruler there, I'm just finding my 2-inch mark and plonk that on there. That's 5 centimetres if you metric. Doesn't have to, you can do that closer together. You could use a 60-degree angle, which works quite well. And you can do very small ones, depends how much time you've got. And then we go the same in the opposite direction here. And then place the ruler, the straight line of the ruler, across the lines that I've just drawn here. And that's going to create the box shape. Now I'm using a heat erasable pen, which isn't really designed for fabric. So do a little patch test on your fabric first, just to make sure that the ink doesn't leave a mark on your fabric, which can happen, particularly on darker fabrics. So little patch test, iron it away. If you see a faint line where the ink's been, then maybe use a chalk instead, or a pencil to mark your lines. That's that. And then I can lengthen the stitch on my sewing machine. So I'm going to take this up to a 2.8 on this machine and literally sew along all of those lines. So just when you think you've finished, turn this over to the other side and it'll make it clearer as to the bit that you've missed here, if you've missed any at all. So put down again and just finish that bit. So because I've used a heat erasable pen, I can now iron away the pen marks. And I've used a red thread on here just because I really want the quilting to stand out. And I think that works really well. So just make those lines disappear. And I think that looks great. If you didn't want to, so just snip those threads. If you didn't want to quilt, then I would suggest that you just sew along each side of the seam, and I think that gives it a nice professional finish. So let's do that with this one. So that's a much simpler finish, so that's up to you. So now let's take our applique piece, and I'm just going to cut with a little border around the edge, because that's the bit that I'm going to sew onto. So I'm going to try not to sew onto the image of the actual robin. Don't make this too detailed, because I'm going to use just a straight stitch on my sewing machine. I'm not going to free motion embroider it. If you're free motioning, then you could probably get some quite nice detail going around the feet and around the beak. But because I'm using a straight stitch, I just want to keep it that as simple as I can. So let's just scratch the back of this away. So take a pin or the point of your scissors and just make a little scratch. And then that's the easiest way to get the paper to peel away. So just pull that off there. That's it. And then the back of this is going to feel quite shiny, but that's the glue, so that's fine. It's not sticky at the moment. And then we can place this, and I kind of think it's going to be nice overlapping a little bit. So yeah, just about there, where there's a gap in the pattern on that side, maybe at a bit of an angle. Further down. I am going to make the base of this square, so I don't want to go too far into the corner, so I don't want him to disappear. So I think just overlapping slightly is quite a nice position for him to be. So now I can take my iron and just press him down there. Now, as this is only a gift bag and it's probably not going to go in the wash, you don't have to sew around the edge. That is a pretty permanent bond. If it is going to be something that's laundered quite a lot, then yes, I would sew. But if you wanted to leave it just as it is there, that is well and truly stuck down. But I'm going to sew as well because I like the look of it. So I'm going to choose a small stitch on the machine this time. So I'm going down to a 2, because that's going to make it easier to go around curves. And I'll just start at the back here. And just take this quite slowly. I'm only going to go around once, so I want it to be quite accurate. So stop with the needle down if you need to pivot. And again, I'm using a contrasting thread. I'm using a red, so it does stand out. So I want this to be quite accurate. So just up to the beak. If you don't have a pattern on your fabric that you can fussy cut like this, fussy cutting just meaning cutting out a particular area of your fabric, you could cut maybe a shape of a circle and make a bauble. A little bit of embroidery on the top would look nice. Just take that loose thread away before I sew it into the applique. Or even a little triangular Christmas tree like we did on the cosmetic bag last week. Just one little triangle. Almost back to the beginning. There we go, that will do. So now we can start putting the bag together. So remember, I made 2 little channels to go across the top. I'm going to fold the end of these. These at the moment are the same width as the fabric. So I'm going to fold the ends of these over twice by 1/4 of an inch, and I'll just finger press that for now, and sew. And excuse me, we'll do this on the ends of both pieces. So try and make the seam the same length, because we want them to match when they go opposite each other on the bag. Snip there, and then the same on this side. And again, that doesn't have to be exactly 1/4 of an inch, just a small hem. Right, then just snip that. Then these I'm folding in half and press. And this one in half and press. With the seam on the inside, so wrong sides together if your fabric has a right or a wrong side. And these are going to go onto the top of the fabric, the front and the back pieces, in the centre, so you could measure to make that exact if you wish. I'm just going to do that by eye, so you've got the same distance on each side. And so, and I'm sewing quite close to the edge here. So stitch back up to normal. So this is within the seam allowance. And we need to do this on both pieces. Now do be aware with these channels, if your thread is your ribbon is a lot thicker, then you'll need to make a wider channel. So let's again just measure that so it's central. And so close to the edge. Now I did say we're going to make the base square, so this is the way I'm going to do it this time. I'm going to take a very large ruler and we'll just make this a small one. Let's do 1.5 inches. I think that would be a good base size for this size of bag. So we're going to draw and then cut 1.5 inches square from the bottom of each piece. Oh, now I need to do that with the lining as well. So before I cut these out, I'm just going to cut the lining to the right size because I know mine is going to be a little bit too big. So take my cutting mat, place this over the top. And then we'll cut 2 lining pieces to this size. Right, and then let's pop that down there. Then we'll mark those 1.5 inch boxes from the bottom corners again, and then cut them all out. I'm cutting through both at the same time with the lining. So let's cut these out. The bigger the squares you cut from the bottom, the bigger the base is going to be. But I think 1.5 inches is quite a respectable size for a bag of this size. So that's about 3 centimetres. Okay. Then let's sew these together. So the lining goes right sides together with the outer piece, and we'll sew straight across the top. And do that on both pieces. Now I know you saw what I forgot to do though, was to cut out the corners of the outer piece. Trying to get it finished quickly, you see. So let's cut these out again. No harm done. Thing is, these are quite quick little bags to make, and I do like the idea of having repurposed giftware. Oh, I did that one. Repurposed giftware. So it's nice to put a little bit of effort into them. But if you've got a lot to make, then they can be made quite quickly, even with the quilting and the forgetting to cut out. Right, so these 2 pieces now right sides together, and I'd like the seams here to match, so I'll put a pin in there, and the same on this side, just so I know they line up when I sew them together. It's not the end of the world if they don't, but it's quite nice when they do. And the same with the seams at the top here, I'd like that to match too. And there. And then I'm going to sew all the way around the edge. So along here, across the bottom, along here, and I'm going to leave a turning gap in one side of about 4 inches, maybe 10 centimetres, just so that I've got enough to get my hand through. So pin all the way around if you prefer to. I'm just holding the seams, I think that's enough. And then we'll sew. Taking your pins out, of course, as you go. Then when I've sewn all the way around, take each side of the corner sections and pull them away from each other so that those edges meet and the seams sit on top of each other, and we'll sew straight across. And we'll need to do that on all 4 corners. So foot down, I'll reverse stitch here just to lock the stitch, and so, and back again. Oops, and the same on this corner, and then we'll do the same with the two linings as well. Then put your hand inside that turning gap and pull the whole thing the right side out. Just going to push out the squares and make sure I caught all of the fabric there as well. Sometimes you can miss. Just make sure my seams are all okay. Happy with that. Pull the two sides of the lining, the gap in the lining, away from each other, and you'll find that the edges roll in enough so that you can sew it. And then we'll just sew over that opening. Hand sew that if you want a completely invisible finish. If this is something that you are making to sell, then you might want to have that finished a little bit neater than machine stitching. But I think for a gift bag that you're going to give to friends and family, who's going to look on the inside? We'll only see what's inside the gift bag. Okay, so let's push the lining inside. And I'll iron around the top. So just push the lining right into the corners. Pull the channel away from the fabric so I can get the iron inside there. And I am going to top stitch this one as well. So just try and make sure that seam is sitting right on the edge. If you'd made this out of a with a firmer interfacing, like a Bosal foam maybe, then that's quite a nice size for a storage box, isn't it? Maybe make the box shape a little bit larger. If you got a 2-inch square out of the bottom, then that I think would make a nice storage box without the drawstring around the top. Just a thought. So funny how things kind of come into your mind as you start making something. Do you find that as well? Oh, I could do this, I could have done that. Always happens. Right, so that's that. Then I will take the accessory compartment off my sewing machine and just top stitch underneath the seam. So I like to start at the side or somewhere that's not going to be too noticeable. I can lengthen the stitch again. I'll go back up to a 2.8 for a top stitch on this machine, and then sew. Over you go. And just as I'm going, I'm just making sure that the fabric is pulled away from the seam so I don't get any puckering. And the top stitching, I think it looks nice. I know I say that a lot. I do like the look of top stitching. It gives a very professional kind of finish to your work, I think, which these little threads don't, so they need to go. But it also helps to keep the lining in place. Right, so that can go back on there before I forget. And then we can thread the ribbon through. So however big your bag is, you'll need 2 pieces of ribbon that are just slightly longer than the circumference at the top of the bag. So like that. And then take a safety pin or a bodkin. If you're using a safety pin, I like to fold the ribbon over so it doesn't tend to tear. Sometimes if you put a pin right at the end of the ribbon, it can make it fray a little bit. And then we'll thread through in this direction first. In you go. Press that so well it won't open. There we go. So just keep feeding that through. And then the second ribbon will go around in the opposite direction. So pull this one through first. Make sure I don't pull it all the way through. Open that out. I like the quilted side, I think. It does look as though I've deliberately put the robin in the centre there, and I have to admit that was quite an accident, but it was quite a good accident, that one. All right, so let's knot the ends of these so they don't come through when I do the opposite side. So just a little knot right in the end of the fibre, and then whoops, in you go. From this side, we'll take the ribbon around in the opposite direction. And I just need to trim this one so that they're the same length. Now you could put a little bead on the end instead of knotting if you wanted to. But then gifts goes inside, that draws up, and I've got a cute little bag. Now these can be made in any size that you like, so that's quite a decent size, but if you've got a very large gift, just make a larger version of it. They can be rectangular, they can be square, they can be any kind of shape or size that you like. The applique, I think, just finishes it off really well, because although that's a gift bag, I don't think I'm going to see that back again. I think that's going to be part of the gift, and it's going to be used maybe hanging on the back of the bathroom door for storage, maybe hair accessories and cotton wool balls and things like that, or even to keep your sewing notions and bits and bobs in. And although I've chosen quite a festive fabric, of course you don't need to. You can make this in any kind of fabric that you wish. So I hope you've enjoyed that little tutorial. I hope you found it useful, and I shall see you again next time. Bye bye.